Hey, welcome into the Husker247 Podcast. It is blizzard conditions outside here on March 19th. Michael Bruntz, how are you enjoying the random Wednesday onslaught of weather that we're experiencing for like the fifth time since the calendar flipped?
Good. The power is flickering a little bit here and there. So if somebody suddenly drops off the podcast, that's what's the plug has been pulled, not by
I
choice.
think I think by saying that you've made people want to listen to the podcast to see which one of us loses power first, as if
Yeah,
it's some sort of survival game
I'll
inside the
foreshadow it.
podcast.
I'll foreshadow it. One of us is going to lose power before the end of this podcast. Who will it be?
Uh, my guess is you. Just
Probably.
generally the neighborhood that I know of which you live in, the power issues that tend to happen over there. Though I think
Yeah,
you're north of there's like one section in Lincoln where if it's just a little bit of a storm, it goes out all the time, and I think you're just north of that neighborhood.
yeah, yeah. I can see those people. They can see my power on when theirs is off. So
Do they give out candles at Halloween to the children so there's always, a light source in the house?
road
They're giving
flares.
out batteries so that way they can make sure the flashlights are good to go.
Yeah, here, kids, trick or treat. Have some D batteries. There's what you get.
Yeah, it makes sense. It really does. BT, what's new with you before we get going?
Not much. Shot an 83 yesterday before the blizzard, so I feel like
Oh,
yeah. I just
Look at
thought
that.
I'd throw that
whoa!
out there.
Dropping that in there. What was working for you yesterday?
Everything,
All three of us
apparently.
golfed this week.
Fairway wood. The rescue club was dialed in, hitting it pure. So hopefully this storm doesn't thwart my momentum.
Yeah, we wouldn't want that to happen. I also got out this week. I know Bruntz did as well. That's probably the most golf that the three of us are going to accomplish in 1 week all year.
Yes.
All right, let's dive into this. I threw it at you guys right before we started the podcast. I want to do some spring superlatives, get some names out there people were interested in seeing. I know spring football isn't starting this week, but next week we'll have the opportunity to talk to more players and coaches, talk to and perhaps even view some of these players during open media sessions. So it felt like a good time to kind of wade into Nebraska 2025 spring football. And so we'll start with a kind of an obvious one. That first media availability that we can go watch them in their warm-ups and their stretching, sometimes in some group work. You can go anywhere. Bruntz hasn't given us marching orders, BC. We can go anywhere. We can watch whoever we want to watch.
Mm-hmm.
What newcomer do you want to get eyeballs on first or are most intrigued by? However you want to phrase the question. When we have open media availability, whenever that is.
Well, Bruntz likes me to shoot some award-winning film off my iPhone. And so
we don't have to listen to Bruntz. There's no adults anymore.
But it's connected to that. I'm drawn toward the shot, toward the visual, and so the wide receivers are always good in that respect, because you can see him gliding under the ball. Who's got just that natural way about him, and obviously with the new additions, I think it's a fun group. Besides Dane Key with Isaiah Hunter. Posted a picture of him on social media the other day, one-handing a football, or otherwise he was throwing the ball and it was pretending that he was one-handing it, but I'm going to say he was one-handing a catch. Hardly Gilmore, I think, is a guy that I'm drawn to see, like just how he looks. And so Ja'Cory Barney, I mean, I don't think he gets talked as much about as he normally would because of the portal additions. And I wrote the other day, I think that could be a good thing for Ja'Cory. Like, you get a little fuel at, hey, they're talking about everybody else. You go to work and you don't have some of the hype that sometimes surrounds a guy who had a freshman season like that because of the portal addition. So that's where I'm going first.
It's interesting because those transfer wide receivers, the three guys you mentioned, Key, Hunter, and Gilmore, overshadow that Nebraska went out and got Cortez Mills, who's going to be here, and Isaiah Mosey, who's going to be here. And so those guys also, while you're over there shooting your award-winning, cinematography from your phone, you're also going to be able to get snippets of that. That wide receiver group, it's hard to explain how much that has changed over other than it doesn't feel like it's a priority for Nebraska as much in 2026 recruiting because they have changed that room and they have brought in some new faces. And then there's some guys that I think they're still excited about that we haven't quite seen as much from, a Quinn Clark or Demetrius Bell when he's healthy or somebody of that nature. All right, Bruntz, where are you going to go? If BC's going to the wide receivers, where are you headed?
I think I'm intrigued by the line. I'm eager to see what
Which line?
Both, I think.
You're taking the trenches.
Yeah, I mean, that's a group.
One's outside and one's inside. Are you going to straddle that like the garage door portion where you can look both directions? Is your periphery vision that good?
Yes. Well, I can turn around. I can rotate, but specifically defensive line, though. I mean, I think obviously not having Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmaker there, it's going to be different. Is Riley Van Poppel ready to step in with that group? I mean, we've seen pictures of him this offseason where, he made Tyson Terry look like his little brother after Terry won the state wrestling tournament. So I think I'm intrigued there by kind of what Nebraska has up front. I mean, I think there's a chance that, that group can kind of make up for the loss of Robinson and Hutmaker in the aggregate with what they've got there. And, I think a big part of that is do you have guys that are capable of playing in the middle of that line? I mean, that's the biggest question mark to me. I mean, I think Van Poppel can be in there. Beyond that, is it Su'Ala Fotu? Like, where do you how quickly do you get down the depth chart of guys with experience? And I think right now it's pretty quick. So, you also get a look maybe of whether Nebraska is going to be doing a little bit more 4-man stuff up front this spring as well, which I think there's a pretty strong case to be made that that's going to happen. So I'll narrow into defensive line because I think that group, more than anything on defense, in my mind, is going to determine, whether or not they can kind of stay at that same level they've been at the last couple of years.
Yeah, there's no shortage of options here. If you're narrowing in on the defensive line, I suppose I will take the offensive line, which has a ton of questions about it. It won't have Turner Corcoran, Teddy Prohaska, Gunnar Gatula, Henry Lutovsky. It will have Elijah Pritchett, who's a player that I suspect we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this spring in one way or another, or hearing from the coaching staff about in one way or another. Rocco Spindler, who we've already heard from, who was up there on Tuesday a week ago discussing his transfer, the offensive line room in general, and what Nebraska has going on over there. And then there's a few other guys, like, I don't know if you where you're at with this, because I think we have a pretty good indication of the people that we suspect are in competition for starting roles. But when Matt Rule was talking about he wants the spring to be about guys like Sam Sledge and Grant Bricks, and then he mentioned Tyler Canuck, who's someone I'm sort of intrigued by. I mean, they added him, what was that, 2 years ago out of the portal. He's now been in the system. This will be his third spring, or did they got him after the spring, their first year in 23? I forget what the timing was on that. Did they have him for spring of 23, or was it after when they added Tyler Canuck?
I believe it was.
I want to say maybe he's a summer. So it's a second spring. It'll be the third season for a guy like that. Can he cement a role on the 2 deep? Can he be a backup for you, whether it's at right tackle? I think he's played some guard. I think he's just sort of a swing person that could be. I mean, I don't think I have to draw out too many scenarios where a guy like that might be relied upon at some point during the season, depending where the rest of Nebraska's depth is with all their other offensive linemen. So I think that offensive line group, besides just the new additions, seeing where they're at with some of the younger guys and what they choose to do without Gunnar Gatula and Prohaska and Corcoran over there at that left tackle spot. Who's playing center? We think it's probably going to be Justin Evans, but there's other people that could work into that rotation too. So there's just a lot happening there. And I think it's an intriguing group. I think there's a lot of talent on the offensive line. I think they're more bullish on their offensive line than maybe externally some people are. And so I want to get eyes on that. And I want to see what that sort of looks like now with all of the different pieces that are missing, and see in which direction Nebraska kind of goes with some of those other players. All right, let's transition here a little bit. Let's try to drill in, try to keep it to one name in particular. Who is a returner? Michael Bruntz, a returning player. It could be a starter. It could be a backup. It could be whatever isn't a starter or a backup. I don't know, a reserve. Anything. Who is a returning player you are excited to get eyes on this spring? Maybe you thought that they had a really nice winter. Maybe you thought that they had done well at the bowl game. Maybe they're transitioning positions. Wherever you want to go with it, someone that is returning from Nebraska's roster. They were there in 24. They're back in 25. Who do you want to see?
Vincent Schaefer.
And why?
Great bowl game. I think when you look at what Nebraska has to replace at linebacker, he's got to be a big piece of that. I think they've got guys in the middle that, they got Watson Trent out of the portal. Javin Wright's back, but I mean, it feels like Vincent Schaefer was on like a very, very sharp upward trend over the last month or so of the season, and he feels like one of those guys that is going to go to that next level, and has to, I think, for this defense to be successful. So I will go with Vincent Schaefer, and I appreciate you limiting me to only one name, and I will only do one name.
Look at that. All right, we're going to throw it to Brian Christopherson. I have a strong guess where he's going to go with this, but we'll see if I'm correct. I'll admit if I was wrong.
I was going to say Van Poppel, and I know we already brought his name up sort of with the previous question, but I mean, he looms so large in sort of, if this D-line can grow into a formidable unit by the fall, a big part of it's going to be if Van Poppel is on the fast track. And I think it's possible that he is, but we'll see. And he's a big dude. I think the redshirt thing, which you can't do a lot in this day and age where he was held to 4 games, it worked out in a way because I think he did really grow behind the scenes. I could tell at the bowl site he was just fired up to have the green light, like, that's behind me. Now it's all go. It's so, and he's been good, like on the goal line and some of those situations. And now we see if he can take that and extend his game, where you're just like, man, he's playing like a year or two older than he actually is. And if he does, it'll go a long way for Terry Braden's crew.
And he's got big shoes to fill, whether it's going to be for Nash Hutmaker as a nose tackle, whether he's playing more in a Ty Robinson role, whether they shake things up entirely. But that's sort of a guy that, even though he's only been in the program for a couple years, kind of going to be looked at as a bit of a leader in that group, because there's not a lot of depth for veterans in front of him. And so I'll be curious if he kind of takes on a role that Ty Robinson sort of assumed when, I think it was, I'm trying to think of who would have, Stoltenberg and Darian Daniels and guys like that had left. Stoltenberg would have been earlier, but Daniels and some of those other ones, Damian Daniels, when they had moved on, it sort of became Ty Robinson's show in the defensive line. Curious if it'll be that for Riley Van Poppel. The name I expected from BC, because he's written about him, and because I think people are really intrigued by him, and because I think the staff over there is excited about what he can do, is Heinrich Haarberg. I have heard from some people that would have plenty of reason to know more than I would, that Haarberg has transitioned quite well in the offseason, that there's really excited about the different things that they can do with him at the tight end position. Nebraska is looking at this as an opportunity for Haarberg to kind of showcase himself into the NFL. I mean, he may not put up big numbers by any means, but I just think that they're going to look for a variety of ways to do things in a unique way at a position at tight end where you've got a guy who you can kind of try to maximize the skill set. And I am really interested what it looks like here in the spring relative to what it was for that bowl game where he stepped in pretty willingly. And you heard Matt Rule talk about it a week ago. He jumped in feet first into that position, and he played more than they anticipated he would in the bowl game, and he played better than they anticipated, and he stuck his nose in for a block when he needed to. And so I think tight end is going to be a really kind of fascinating group in 2025. Heinrich Haarberg is going to be a big part of that. And so he's someone I'm really intrigued. Anytime I can get over there and watch what it looks like and what they're doing, I think they have some ideas of how to get him in space and maybe either get him the ball or even use him as a decoy at times to set defenses up thinking one thing, and you're able to get the ball going in an entirely opposite way. And so I'm very intrigued by what happens with Heinrich Haarberg and how he's utilized, because I think there's a lot of confidence over there that he's
that's
a
good
special athlete, and they're going to turn him loose. I've got another name for you guys that we can kind of talk about at large. I think it's a unique situation for him, and I think a lot is going to be expected of him. This is the first spring where Emmett Johnson's walking in as kind of your clear-cut running back number one. This is the expectation when he came back. Never truly went into the portal, but when he came back onto the roster and shut things down, this is running back number one for Nebraska. And he's had to kind of come from the back of the pack the last 2 years to really sort of make a name for himself in each of 23 and 24. And now he is going to be the number one running back. What does that look like this spring? What kind of workload do you think Nebraska loads him up with a lot this spring, or do they try to manage that a little bit? And then beyond that, who emerges as sort of the primary backup? Who's someone that is going to be there if Emmett Johnson needs a breather? Is it Quentin Ives? Is it Mekhi Nelson? I see Bruntz shaking his head because he's been trying to answer this question for a while now. Is it Parker or Booth when we get to the fall, because Booth is limited? I'm not. Is Parker one of the early enrollees? Is he already here?
I believe so.
Or is he? So there's definite questions at that running back group.
Who is number two right now? I texted you guys and asked this off air the other day. Who's number two right now?
I think it's Quentin Ives with his 1 carry for 2 yards and a touchdown. He's got the most returning production.
I would guess Ives is 2 going into spring, and then you see what happens. I think obviously that's in pencil, but if you go back to the bowl practices, I remember Holgerson had the comment, like, number 28, he said, is doing some good things, and he gave him that 1 carry and they got in the end zone. So I would say him, and we'll see. It's one of those like ultimate, like, I always hate that phrase, but for him, it is truly like that prove it off season, like it's going to go one way or the other. So we'll see.
Parker is enrolled early, by the way.
Okay. So he'll be in the mix as well. And that was a guy who had a prolific senior season at Cardinal Ritter Prep. Are there former walk-ons that are still on the roster at the running back spot that we need to keep an eye on? Off the top of my head, I can't think of any names, but Nebraska's routinely had a guy or two that comes from usually smaller school here in the state and walks on at Nebraska. We've seen, I was about to say, is it Trevor Lubin? He was one of them that we've seen in the past. I mean, going way back, you got Austin Rose, but they've had some different walk-on running backs who have contributed in the past. Is there anybody that you can think of at that group that maybe has experience that could be pushing in the spring?
There was some good feedback about Rowdy Bauer last year at times, and so he'd be just a wild card to keep in mind. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, some of these guys are going to be fighting to try to get on the 105 too when the roster cuts come, and so I think it's worth knowing some of those names. Bruntz, what are your expectations for Emmett Johnson? I mean, I know it's early to ask you what you think he's going to do in 2025, but here I am asking you what I think he's going to do in 2025.
Give me a specific outcome.
Yeah, is he going to have 649 receiving yards, or is it going to be more than that?
You would take 649, I feel like.
That'd be pretty good for a running back, yeah.
You'd take that. I don't know. Would it surprise you if I told you he had almost 40 catches last year?
No.
He had 39.
I picked receiving yards for, like, I think he's going to be used as an everything running back in a way that we haven't seen Nebraska utilize a running back in a while.
Yeah.
Right. I kind of think Emmett Johnson is going to be, to use a phrase that I love, a bell cow, but not necessarily just straight load him up with carries. Like, I think they're going to find a lot of ways to put the ball in his hands.
Yeah, he was right around 600 yards rushing. I'm looking at it. I don't have that committed to memory. But it's the thing I wonder about with him is if you're going to use him in that way, you kind of got to pair him with somebody. Like who's the
you need a short yardage back. You need a guy who can kind of give him a little bit of a breather. I agree.
And that's what I don't like. Is it Ives? Is it one of the freshmen? Is it somebody? Is it Mekhi Nelson? Is it somebody who's not on the roster right now? Like that. That's where I kind of wonder, what the actual use of him will be. And I think a lot of it depends on kind of who else is in that room and can help you. But it felt like in the last month of the season that Nebraska, especially in the passing game with the running backs, unlocked something with Emmett Johnson. They were able to find some more explosive plays in the passing game thrown to the running backs. I think that Dana Holgerson's going to use him in that way a little bit more. And so then it becomes a question of workload and kind of, okay, if he's catching 6 balls a game, 5 balls a game, what do the carry numbers look like? Is he a 20 carry a game guy? Maybe. That's what I kind of wonder is like, is there a next step in kind of his durability? And how do you make, there were a couple plays last year where it felt like you make one guy miss and it's a big gain versus, a 10-yard gain or something like that. He kind of needs to make that next step. So I think a lot of my answer is kind of like, well, who else is there? Because I think in some ways, Dante Dowdell was a nice compliment to him last year. And now they have to find that guy or that depth behind him to kind of spell him a little bit. But I think he's going to be used as a very complete back. And I really like the look of things with him in the passing game in the last month of the season last year. I think that's a really good fit for him.
Think about some of the most memorable plays from Emmett all in the passing game. The touchdown at USC. Remember the drive third quarter against Wisconsin? It was one of Holgerson's best of the year when they just had Wisconsin on ice skates. It was like a 6-play drive, and they hit Emmett, and he just waltzed in. And then the fourth down against Boston College, it was a fourth down play in the Pinstripe Bowl, which was huge, as it turned out, to winning that game. So, I mean, it is interesting that you kind of led with the receiving part for a running back, because I have to think as Emmett was kind of going through what he was going to do, in the offseason, that had to be one of the most alluring parts, is like how he was getting, there were layups for him at that position. And I would want more of that.
Well, and I think if you have teams that are worried about, if Nebraska can show the ability to move the ball down the field passing, it's only going to open up underneath for Emmett Johnson too. And then you suddenly have kind of the best of both worlds, but it's a big if. So we'll see where we get there. All right, here's the next one for you guys. The next prompt. We'll start with Brian Christopherson, because he was the one that actually mentioned this. Who is an unheralded addition from the offseason? Could be a high school guy, could be a transfer portal player that you're kind of excited about to see what they can do this spring.
I prompted you, and now I'm thinking like I'm kind of going a different direction. I think I don't think Andrew Marshall is underheralded. So I would say Justin Rhett is like a guy that everybody just forgets that they like added, and he came from Georgia, and he was a big time recruit. And so I'm just interested, like if a guy like that, pops up a little bit. I don't think he was on the injured list from what I remembered. It was like 20 some names, but he wasn't on there. And wouldn't you say he's a guy that people sort of like gloss over and they forget, like, oh, they added him? I mean, and I understand there's a lot of veterans back there and there's a lot of second and third year guys who are interested in the secondary. But whenever a guy pops in from a big time program that obviously has the traits that made him like a 4-star recruit, I'm interested what he looks like in person in the Husker gear.
Bruntz?
So it's somebody that was not on the roster last year?
Yeah, let's say a newcomer. And, you can define unheralded how you want, but we've spent a lot of time talking about Dane Key and Hardly Gilmore and Dasan McCullough. And, I think Andrew Marshall actually fits with what we're discussing here, because if you ask someone to talk about the 3 biggest transfer additions, I doubt he's one of those names. So I thought it worked quite well. Bruntz, who do you want to go with?
Do we talk enough about Williams Nwaneri?
That's where I was going to go with. And I don't know that he's unheralded, but I don't think that we talk about him that much because we don't know what I don't know that we have any idea what he was going to be or what he's going to be.
You're talking about a former top 10 recruit. He's listed at 6'7", 255. He's like, when you walk into the first practice that media get to see, I mean, he's going to be a guy I think your eyes are just go to. Like that's what that position, a guy should look like. And Brian wrote it this week on the site. I thought it was a good piece. It's like, okay, who's going to lead Nebraska in sacks this year? Who's the production? Who's going to be that guy that, on third down, when you got to get pressure, who's going to do that? I mean, why not him? I mean, he's got the physical tools. He didn't put it together at Missouri in his first year, but for a guy that kind of checks all the boxes, I mean, it just doesn't feel like he's being discussed much at all this spring, which I find kind of interesting because I think he's an extremely high upside guy that could make Nebraska's defense look pretty darn good. In situational spots, and they want to get better on third down. Like that's one of the big ticket items for John Butler this year is how do you improve third down efficiency, and having somebody like that can just go in there and wreck shop on third down. That's a pretty easy cheat code, I think, to make those numbers look a little bit better.
I'm going to stick in that same position group, and I'm going to bring up Gabe Moore, who I don't know what he's going to be in 2025. I don't want to say that he's going to make the 2 deep. This is a guy who hasn't played really in his career, but there's something about him where Nebraska's like, all right, we want to at least take a look. We want this guy to come in. We want to get a look under the hood. We want to see, all right, he's big enough. He's a physical player. He had some health issues when he was at Mississippi State. He wasn't able to play because of that at times. And what is Gabe Moore? Is he someone that can eventually, and I don't even mean like is he a guy that can eventually help out later in the season? Is he someone that you can bring along slowly and then work into as a rotational piece? Is he someone who can just emerge right away and be pushing as a backup on the defensive line? So some of it for me, it might be a bust. Like it might just be a dice roll and it comes up as a bust for you. But with Gabe Moore, there's a reason they brought him in. And, Jalen George would be another example of this, but he's limited this spring, so we're not going to be able to kind of see him at all. But with Moore, is there something there? And what is it? And how quickly can they unharness it? That's kind of where I'm really intrigued, because it felt like there was other defensive linemen that Nebraska was, and you guys know this, that were set up to take visits. They were coming to Nebraska to take visits. That then those visits were canceled, and yet they chose to take Gabe Moore. There's a reason for that, and I want to figure out what that is. I want to hear from Coach Braden. I want to learn more about why Gabe Moore, was not intended to be said that way, is on the roster and why they brought him here. What he could potentially bring. So he's someone that stands out to me in that regard. Last question here is we're going to finish things up. Kind of a shorter podcast. Okay. Here's one. Who has been a backup throughout the majority of their career or the entirety of their career that you think could make a little bit of noise this spring? I'll give you a name because when Bruntz was talking about the pass rush, this came up to me. Maverick Noonan had more sacks than Cam Lenhart did last year. Maverick Noonan is a guy that tore his ACL as a freshman. He's a productive player at Elkhorn South. He's a legacy. He's someone I think people forget that it's on the roster. I know he's a little bit on there's a bunch of names at that jack position, but would it completely shock you guys if Maverick Noonan in his third year with the program, fully healthy, is able to turn things loose a little bit and can be a backup player or emerges as a special teams option and then starts to get more reps down the line and plays a little bit more, and then by the end of the year we're not talking about who Nebraska has to go get out of the portal to be a pass rusher because they have somebody like that in Noonan who can help alongside a McGahee for the upcoming seasons. Am I like too far off my rocker here with Maverick Noonan?
No, he's had injuries too. That's been a part of it.
That's what held him back.
Yeah.
So if he's healthy, it could be a big spring for him.
Yeah. And I honestly, at the Bull site, I saw a guy coming onto the field and I was like, who the stink is it? Like, I didn't process right away who it was. I was like, man, this is an impressive looking kid. Maverick Noonan. It was Maverick Noonan. And I was just drawn to him. Like, he's definitely got a presence. Like, he looks the part. So
it's kind of a weird comparison because one of these guys played immediately and then he always talked. He became kind of a go-to media person. He has a build that can look kind of like a Garrett Nelson. Like, I think, I don't know that he's going to get to that level of production, but I think that's sort of the idea, that he can be that kind of player for you, down the line. He has that sort of build. He has that kind of ability. Plus, he has blonde hair and long locks. So I think it kind of starts and stops maybe right there. Bruntz, what do you think? Who's a player that can emerge from a backup spot, or maybe hasn't even been a backup, but can emerge from way, way off the charts?
I forget which of you mentioned him, but Quinn Clark would be somebody I would at least pay a little bit of attention to. He's certainly athletic, big-bodied wide receiver. Looks a little bit different than other guys in that group. Nebraska lists him at 6'5", 205. I don't know how accurate that is, but
do you think he's taller?
Maybe a bit. I wonder if he weighs a little bit more than that too. The thing with him was, later in the year he was traveling. Like, he was in the travel roster, and whenever you start to see guys who are redshirting or they're true freshmen and they end up on the travel roster, like, I at least kind of make note of that. I mean, I think another guy would be like a Braylon Prude, who's probably going to factor somewhere on special teams, this year, I think, for sure. So I think it's, Quinn Clark's a guy that might kind of put himself in that conversation. I mean, I wrote this on the board this week that, you have kind of like you got Hunter Key, Gilmore, Barney, Cortez Mills. There's room there for guys to get into that rotation. I mean, it feels like it's a little bit different from most years where, in March, you're like, oh man, you got 10 wide receivers. They got, a huge group of guys. And then you get to September and you got like 6 who can help you. And it just feels like this year, with what's coming back from a year ago, there's just not much returning production from within the program aside from Barney and Carter Nelson. So there's an opportunity for a guy like Quinn Clark to get in the mix. I mean, I think you're going to need Cortez Mills to factor somehow, or maybe another of the freshmen wide receivers that came in and enrolled early. So that's a group I would look at closely for potentially having guys emerge, especially with a new wide receivers coach, kind of a clean slate for everybody, and maybe being able to get in the mix sooner than later there.
BC, any name or two that comes to mind for you?
Mason Goldman, as you talk about development of the defensive line, he played in 8 games last year. He did have a sack against UTEP. late. He was on the travel roster as early as Indiana when things were still very much out there for this team. And so, he's a guy who I think he's in his third year. So you always kind of, I believe Rule's exactly right when he talks about like trench play and guys who get to that third year. And sometimes that's when it changes. So, there's like a collection of guys like on the D line. And I do think it's a concern spot until it's not, like him, like Jordan Ochoa, like a Dylan Parrott. There's these guys that are interesting. Like, who are we going to hear the most about from sort of that group of guys this spring? And he'd be one. And I know I always do this in sheep, but defensive backs, I'd throw one out there too, that I don't think gets talked about as much, but he actually popped up in interviews here and there, was Rex Guthrie. Like, they kind of liked his versatility. And I would just say, don't forget about him. Like, we kind of get locked in on a certain like 3 or 4 guys beyond the regular starters that could make their move. Well, there's a whole bunch of them at DBs. Bruntz mentioned one of them in Peru. Like Kamir Prescott got mentioned by Sierra Wright at the bowl game, and Guthrie's been mentioned. So that group is going to be really interesting, but he'd be a player I wouldn't forget about because this staff loved Guthrie as a recruit and just like his traits and what he could do. And we'll see if it starts to pay off.
I was going to say he was the guy that I feel like internally they were really excited about. And then he had that season ending injury.
Yeah.
Was it right before? Like right at the beginning of the season, right before you guys were going to go watch him play.
Bruntz and I interviewed him when he was on like a little scooter for his leg, like on the side.
Little did you know that you were going to see future Husker Tanner Turch in that game, and potential future Husker Camden Jensen, the top of Nebraska's tight end board as well. You did not realize when you were at Heritage versus,
I don't know.
Pueblo. I don't know.
Pueblo, Directional Pueblo.
That you could have seen 3 Huskers in that game. 3 guys that they're excited about.
We noted Jensen because he was every bit of 6'7", 240. Like he, trust me, on a very dusty football field in Pueblo, Colorado, those kind of measurables stand out a little bit.
Where they just let us wander right down to the field without any.
That was nice of them.
There was no security at all.
If we stayed long enough in the fourth quarter, they probably would have let us take a few snaps. Like that's how accommodating they were. So,
what position would you have tried to wander in at?
I don't know. Like just run out there for like an extra point just to see if anybody notices. Like guy's got a backpack. You standing next to Camden Jensen. Could you have been the second tight end in a formation there? We know that's your favorite position. Yeah. Well, it wouldn't have been Brian's because we know how he feels about tight ends. Yeah. Jack Stoll in particular. I appreciated someone updated us to Jack Stoll signed with another team and then let us know that Brian was probably upset about it. So yeah.
I don't even know how that started.
Yeah.
That's like a 5-year-old joke at this point.
Yeah. I probably could have snuck in there at tight end, I think. Especially late. I mean, I could have done some things.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to touch on? We got a couple minutes before we're going to shut this thing down. Somehow all of us still have power. Even the wind is whipping down here in Southeast Lincoln. I don't know what it looks like for you guys. I'm looking out the window. I don't know if the small trees are going to survive this whole thing.
Yeah.
They're getting a little parallel.
I liked one question you asked on the board because it's
skeptical.
Who are you skeptical of? Not, and I mean, just like who's got to show it to you? Who do you got?
For me, it's the obvious, easy one. I'm going to be skeptical of him until I'm not, and that's Elijah Pritchett because I haven't heard good things before he came to Nebraska, and early advanced stuff has been so from people that I've talked to that have reason to know what's going on over there. So I don't know. They invested a lot in Elijah Pritchett. He has to be good enough to play. He doesn't have to be all conference. I'm not asking for him to be all conference. But he can't suck. He just can't suck. And I'm going to be concerned about that one until I'm not.
You got one, Bruntz?
No.
I'll say,
buy me some time.
Yeah, I'm not. Skeptical is the wrong word because he's so important to the roster. like Marquise Buford and like Singleton, like I think have great potential, but like we talk so much about newer guys and all this stuff. Like those two, like just elevating is so big, like in the back end. I know they're going to be
Going
great
from
leaders.
solid to good.
Yeah, to like, man, they're dudes. Like they're just like, and I'm sure they're challenging themselves with that. And Marquise has dealt with some tough injuries, but obviously his brother Mario's rising up, and Marquise is an example of him. But like him having a big finish, I think is important. Buford.
I guess going back to what we were talking about earlier, like I feel good about Emmett Johnson. Like I feel good about where he is now. Everything else in the running back room right now, I need to see it with my own eyes of like who is number 2. I mean, we've heard about Quentin Ives for a number of years.
Is that an Austin Powers quote that just snuck in there?
That?
Who is number 2?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Who does he work for?
Who does he work for?
But I mean, we've seen one carry with Quentin Ives. The coaches are very convicted that he is going to be a guy over there, but we haven't seen it yet. I think the 2 freshmen, have a chance, but that's tough for 2 freshmen to come in right away and really kind of blow the doors off. So I think that's probably what I'm a little bit skeptical about, especially on offense, where it feels like they upgraded the playmakers at a number of spots.
All right. I think we've hit and touched on just about everything we wanted to discuss here in today's podcast. If you want more Husker 247 content, we invite you to join us over at Husker247.com. Plenty of football coverage ramping up as spring football is on the way. We've got recruiting coverage. We've got baseball. We've got basketball. With the Crown, Nebraska has been invited, has accepted the invite. They will play Arizona State. BT, do you know the day?
March 29th.
30th?
March 29th, the Monday after the Final Four set against Bobby Hurley's Sun Devils. And the portal opens up March 24th for officially. So that'll be an interesting ride too. Yeah,
so a lot going on in basketball, and we will have coverage of that. So check out everything we have going on at Husker247.com. For Michael Bruntz, for Brian Christopherson, I'm Mike Schaefer. We're Husker 247. We'll catch you next time.